Hi everyone, welcome to episode 21 of Livestream Rebels with me, Mark, and him, Dan. And sorry we're a little bit late. I'll let Dan explain exactly what happened there. So he's the naughty boy this week. It seems like forever since we've actually been live, which it has actually been quite a while. So looking forward to kind of getting stuck into some more content for you. And talking about some recent events that we had going on, as you would have seen if you read the description of this particular episode. So, do you want to explain, Dan, what's been going on?
Explain why you were late. Basically, Mark was running late and I helped him with a computer issue last minute, which held it up quite a bit. No, I was at a meeting this morning and it overran. And then a train went over the tracks, which made me about 5 minutes more late. But it's my fault. It is my fault. It's not the train's fault. It's my mismanagement of time. So I'll blame that. But yes, today we are talking about event Wi-Fi, which is something that we've been offering from about 2018. That's when it all started. And it started off by, just to give you a bit of background, me going to an event where I was working on it and we needed Wi-Fi there. And we used it for some social media posts on the day. Some of the other event managers used it. And from there, it sort of expanded. And we did it on a few events with them. And then we got asked to do it at a few more events in Blythe. And that's how it all started. So it really grew from something small that was very unintentional. And then over time, we've taken it seriously and really invested kit into it in the last couple of years. And we've been doing it, I'd say, properly at a status highlight over the last probably 3 or 4 years. It helped a lot when Starlink got released. That was a big game changer for us. Before that, we were using SIMs. And even now, the SIM cards we use for Event Wi-Fi are very different to the ones that we were using previously. So there's a lot of change, and a lot of that change comes from both mine and Mark's development over the last few years, especially in the kit we've used and the kit from other aspects of the company, especially with those SIM cards that we've been using, which I'll discuss more about very soon. So I think you might have some slides or a bit of a chat as well, Mark.
I have got some slides coming up, but just to give a bit more context on why it's important to consider having a solution like the one that we provide for an event is quite often these events are in remote locations and they may not be able to get a particularly good cell signal. And it's especially important for if you've got traders who are obviously trying to sell goods, whether that be, teas, coffees, food, products, etc., to the audience that are coming to your particular event. And if they can't take payments, cardless payments, as a lot of us have now transitioned into, I never ever carry cash with me anymore. And I need to make all of my payments, either using a card or using my phone. And if you haven't got a signal to be able to connect and make that payment, then ultimately you've potentially lost out on a sale. And we have had conversations with people where they've said they've actually lost a lot of money because they weren't able to take those payments. Now, that could be a make or break for your event because the trader is then going to say, well, it's not worth me coming back because you don't have access to the infrastructure to allow us to actually, ply our trade and sell our goods and ultimately enhance the experience of, the event itself. And you've also got the added complexity, or should I say the added, not complexity, but you've got the added issue of if you are taking payment on the door to come into the event and you have no way of being able to take those electronic payments, if you don't take cash, or you're not geared up for it, or you're not promoting the fact that you take cash, then you still need to have, a connection to be able to take those payments. That's why pretty much a lot of this infrastructure that we've invested a lot of money in over the years is now allowing us to provide this service to people who have events in remote locations, but also locations that aren't necessarily remote, but might not get a very good signal, or might be over congested. Because ultimately we have a tendency to use different systems to what everybody else would be connected to on a mobile phone within an event arena. And it just means that we can avoid that congestion, that clog, that bottleneck, basically, of the cell tower not being able to cope. As an example, last year I was down watching the rugby at Twickenham, and there were loads of people standing at the gates because it's all electronic entrance, and loads of people saying, I can't download my ticket because the cell signals were congested. Yes, okay, that's quite an extreme example when you've got over 80,000 people trying to get into one venue, but it can happen anywhere, and it all depends on how many cell towers there are in the area that are providing the signals to that particular geographic location. So it's vitally important that you've got either a backup or you've got a different system that you're using, and ultimately that's why our Wi-Fi system comes into its own, which we will explain a bit more in more detail about how we actually go about that and what the options are basically for the stuff that we do. And Dan will give some examples of kind of how he circumnavigated a lot of the potential issues that cropped up at the event he was doing at the weekend. So let's get the slides up, Dan. You can start your wonderful intro into event Wi-Fi.
Oh, I did not expect that one to come up first, but yes, this is a card reader. This is not the order I sent, is it?
Well, I've just loaded them up the way, and you've numbered them, so it's just come up in the way that they've been numbered. So
no bother. Right. Well, I'll talk about them in this order, and I'll hope for the best. So this is a square card reader. So one thing we were doing at the weekend was actually taking payments on the gates for people to actually enter this 4x4 festival. So the festival was called Castlewood 4x4. We were meant to start with a lovely drone image there of the whole site, but we'll there we are. There it is. That's the festival. So it's called Castlewood 4x4. As if
hold my hands up, my fault this time. It started at slide 11 for some strange reason, but that's I'm still going to blame you because
go for it. It's like reading the book backwards.
I'm not taking the blame.
I'm writing a book about my life. I don't want to spoil the ending, but I'll write a book. So this was the event site here. Now, this was on the Saturday when it was fairly busy, but I think that was before it fully opened because there's not many people milling about there. So we were just based behind that tree at the bottom. We were just to the right of that. And what we had there was a Starlink system. And then we were providing Wi-Fi to the whole site. So there was a few logistical challenges with this one. One, there's about 70 odd traders. Two, you've got about 1,400 to 500 people on the site, which causes congestion, as Mark talked about earlier. And then at the back of the tree line, at the very back there, that's where the other gate was for the people camping. And then at the other side, there was also another gate for people camping there. Now, this isn't my drone shot. I stole this because I forgot my drone. So this is from the Castlewood 4x4 Facebook page. So give credit to them for that. So we had two independent points where we needed ticketing. We also then had an event management place that was also far away for our mesh network to reach. And then we also had the main field. Now, one thing that we could have done here is actually made it all mesh and put in point-to-point systems everywhere. However, because of the masts we use, a little bit of sway on them can cause them to mismatch, and then you don't get a very good connection. And we couldn't have a connection going down when it's as pivotal as this, including checking people in. So what we did was we put Keysims in, which is a fantastic SIM card from a guy who is called Graham Robinson, who is massively helpful. And I've visited his bin. His bin is lovely. And I phoned him up on the Thursday because I had two Keysims with me, but I needed one more, and he gave us three. So he's really good. And it was useful to have those just in case we needed them over the weekend. So we used Keysim SIM cards on both of the gates. Now, they're a bit different from normal SIM cards. With a normal SIM card, you'd get one network. So you either Vodafone, EE, 3, Sky, who run off other networks and all this sort of stuff. With Keysim, it's a multi-network SIM. And the way we have them set up in our portal is they can detect what network is the strongest and latch onto it and connect to it. Now, you do pay a little bit more than you'd normally pay for a SIM, but from our experience with them for live streaming and also providing services like this, they are massively, massively, massively beneficial. And I'll let Mark talk about them a bit later on as well when we talk about those gates a bit more. So this was the site we were covering, and there's a lot of logistical things there. I don't know if you want to go on to the next slide, Mark, and I can see what that is. That might be a bit of a shock to me. This is the Starlink. Yes, we're on the right track now. I know where I'm at. So this is our Starlink system, which is a fantastic piece of kit. It's a satellite system provided by a company called SpaceX, who's run by Elon Musk, who likes changing the name of social media networks to one letters. And it's a fantastic system for getting really good amounts of data to a middle of nowhere, basically. So the way these work is there's satellites in the sky. You might have seen them because sometimes there's a line of them going across. And those satellites circle the Earth and provide a data connection to Starlink satellites on the ground, like us. So in America, they started off in America and started orbiting around that, specifically to provide stuff for America, and now they're expanding out. So the UK is probably not as fast as it can be at the moment because they're still launching satellites as we go, but it's pretty much there, and it's a great system for us. The problem is with Starlink is you do get something called packet loss. So when you're running it, and as it detaches from one satellite and goes to another, you lose that little bit of data. Now, it's not much, but it's a little bit. And sometimes we've had it where it does just disconnect from the satellite and doesn't reconnect until a couple of minutes later. I've only had that happen once, though. So you may see that little white bit on there as well. That is a mobile antenna. So what we have is we have a failover system. So if Starlink drops out and we don't have any connection, it will then move over to the mobile data. And that happens pretty much instantly. It would be a few milliseconds in between the two happening. And that's thanks to the Ubiquiti system that we're using now, the UDM Pro, which is basically a box that's rack mounted and manages all these connections for us and manages the whole system. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next bit. I don't know if you can switch to the next one, Mark. So this is another Starlink system we had at Pride. I just thought I'd put that in there just to show you a couple of different mounting options we have for it. So the previous one you saw, that was on a tripod. This one is actually mounted to one of our quick clamps that go on top of shipping containers. We've got them that specifically fit into the holes, so we can put them on for permanent, temporary installations, basically, that are a bit more fixed than just on a tripod and strapped down. So on this one, we have one of our old access points. We have the mobile as a backup, and then we also have the Starlink on top, and that's a fantastic option there just to get it off the ground a bit. And it means it's a bit more, it can withstand a lot more weather on that one, a bit more wind. So yeah, I don't know if you want to go on to the next one, Mark. That previous one was from Pride, where we're providing internet for the ticketing and also the event management hub. So this is the access point. This is one of them. We have 10 in total, all across the site. And what we've done here is we've put it on a mast. It's clamped onto the top of the mast. And then at the bottom, we've got a black box with the battery and stuff in it, and the AC to PoE, Power over Ethernet switch. Not switch, converter, sorry. And then we've also got a bit of red fencing, which is not a fire at the top of the Blackpool Tower. I was going to send Mark a photo of a load of that in a bin and just say it was a fire, but no, that didn't happen in the end. I was too busy packing up. So yeah, this is our normal setup. So we have 10 of these around the site. Now, I don't know if you want to go to the next slide, Mark, because I think there's one there that's attached to a flagpole that was already at the event. This just added a bit more height to it. Unfortunately, the way I had to get up there was a bit unelegant. I'm glad we don't have a photo of that. I had to put the truck bed down, reverse my pickup to the point of that, and then climb on the back of the pickup, which was very high, and sort of clamber up and do it. which was a good test. Luckily, it can hold a lot of weight. So that was a good way of getting it up a bit and getting it out of the way of the ground to avoid it, because they need to be line of sight, these. So these need to be within line of sight of each other to actually get a connection. If they're not line of sight, you'll drop connection quite a bit. So this one was pointing forward to the other side of the field, I believe. I don't know if you want to go to the next one. And there's another example of one that's a bit lower down. And this one was actually right next to where the main hub was, so it didn't have far to go, but that was providing a little bit of just a stronger connection to the traders there, and also the fairground rides. And the way we measure this out on site is we went round with a wheel, one of the measuring wheels, and each of these can be 100 meters apart. Now, actually, in fact, they can be a little bit further than that. They can be about 185 plus is what they're spec'd out at. But I don't trust a lot of stuff I read online, so we put them out at 100 meters just to make sure we're well within that in case there's any issues. So we went round, measured out 100 meters from each point, put a flag down where they were, and then when we came to install, we knew exactly where we were installing. Now, something that we did find a challenge on this one was the fact that actually when we installed on Thursday, all that was really there infrastructure-wise was a few marquees and water lines and stuff and power. There wasn't actually a lot of the traders. There was a few of them, but not all of them. And there was no campers, and there was none of this fairground ride. So as we went round and installed, on the Friday, we went round and had to move things to basically fit them better into the site as it grew. We had to do that on Saturday as well. So that's something to be mindful of, that even though you have an original site plan in your head, and even though you run out and measure everything absolutely accurately, the fact is that you will have to adapt things as it goes, because as sites get built, things will move. Now, what you can do is, if you have a more solid site plan beforehand, you could actually plan all the line of sights depending on where you are. What we have to do for a lot of our jobs is carry backups and carry extras just in case we need it, which is still recommended on a lot of things, just in case anything happens. Because for instance, this one, we had one trader rock up on the Saturday. They'd seen the event from over the hedge and asked if they could trade. And luckily they had space and they said yes. So that was another trader added that we didn't have before that could have blocked somewhere that we were. So it was an adaptation on the site as we went. I don't know if you can go to the next slide for me, Mark. So this is just the back of one of our units here, and this was testing a couple of weeks ago with Mark at an undisclosed location in Newcastle, just off the A1 south from somewhere. So this was when we were testing them, just check the ranges and made sure they all work. And we do this quite a lot with our kit. We take it for runs out and make sure it works and do proper testing on it. And this was a really good test. I mean, we got out of these, we got over 200 meters plus, I'd say. Is that about right, Mark? Over 200 meters? Yeah. From one point, and that was even behind a tree line. So we were really impressed with this kit. And it became really handy for that sort of stuff. So I don't know if you can go into the next one. This is our old one, and this I'm just going to talk a little bit about congestion at the event. So one thing that we couldn't do with our previous system, which was an older system, which you can see there in the corner, that little white speck, that's one of our access points at a dog show. We couldn't do a lot of stuff with our old system in terms of channel optimization, in terms of adding other networks on, in terms of remote management. The reason for this new purchase is it adds so much more to our portfolio and our use of what we can actually do. We can add better failovers in. We can also remotely control everything. I could be sat in Newcastle running an event down south. Not that we do that because we like having someone on site, but theoretically, I could do that. We also can then filter websites a lot better. We can filter traffic. We can send traffic in different directions. With the failover system, we don't have to use it as a failover. We can actually load balance. So if the Starlink doesn't have a very good connection, we can say, right, use 50% of that connection and use 50% of a cellular connection and merge the two together and use them. Or what we can also do is say, right, a guest network, that's going to go over Starlink, and the trader network is going to go over SIM. And we can actually split out the networks onto different inputs, WANs on this one, and we can split it out and make it balance across each, so we've got an equal spread. And it gives far more control. There's so much more we can do with this system. We can also view each user individually, each device individually, lock it to certain access points if we want, and we can also monitor that device's Wi-Fi experience, which is really helpful for us to go around and see where we can put things. So if you want to go on to the next slide. And as an event grows, and as more people come on, as more traders come on, a lot of them have their own Wi-Fi stuff at the moment. That can also interfere with what we've got on site in terms of channels. So we can optimize the channels on our system to avoid that and avoid congestion, making our connections stronger, making it better, and making it travel further across the site. This is just another one of our old access points that I put in there just to show you a little bit closer. So you can see it's a lot bigger than what we've got at the moment. It's a lot bigger. And we've still got these. We've still got these. We used one at this event over the weekend just because there was one a bit further out that we couldn't get to with the mesh network. So we put it on the roof of their van, and we actually just bridged the connection between the two. Now, that's not ideal. You'd really want to keep everything within the mesh to keep it on the same channels and to keep everything managed. However, we can use these to bridge if necessary. Don't know if you can go on to the next one, Mark. And this is how it's all powered by one logo. No, it's actually an EcoFlow. So these are little batteries. These are little 300 watt batteries. They're about that big. They're great pieces of kit. They take about an hour to charge, and they'll power our unit for about 15 hours, I worked out over the weekend, 15, 16 hours, give or take, which I was quite impressed by. So that's a full day event that they'll power it for. We had a little bit of an issue overnight on the Thursday when we set them up and we left them running. I came back and wondered why all of them were about 40%, 50%. Turns out that there was a feature that I forgot to turn off on them. And I'm glad I realized that on the Thursday night rather than a trade day. And it was actually automatically turn off after 6 hours. So we turned that feature off. They worked great. They charge up really fast, which is good for us. They run a load of stuff. So they run a normal 3-pin UK plug. But you can also plug in USB into them. You can plug in USB-C. You can also plug in 12 volt, what you'd use in your car, which is a big game changer for us because it means they've got numerous applications. They're not just used for the event Wi-Fi. We can use them to power camera systems with us. We can bring them to events and use them for other stuff, or we can bring, we can rig them up in various places to power various things, which is really good. Then if you can go to the next slide. So at the two gates we had when people were coming in, and coming in, it was actually just for the day tickets. We needed to take payments. So we'd recommended to Adrian, the event organizer, that we use Square. We've been using Square for a very long time. I like the readers. I think they've got a good feel to them. They're also very simple to use, never miss a beat, got good battery life on them, nice bright screens, and they're quite self-explanatory. So it's what sort of I'd recommend if people were just going to do something themselves. So we already had one of these, so we went out and got another one, and rented it out to the event. So this was a great way to take payment on the weekend. People could tap, or they could put their card in. It also has a receipt printer built into it. However, when I gave it to the security guard who was doing the tickets, he says, "What about if I run out of receipt paper?" And I said, "I can guarantee you will not run out of receipt paper. You'll probably only do about 4." And he did 5. And he said I was right. So that's all right. Then we know that we're not going to run out of receipt paper anytime soon. I've got about 5,000 rolls downstairs that came with these devices, and never had to change a roll yet. So they also do your SMS receipts and your email receipts, which is great. You can custom brand stuff, so all your logos on it. And also Square has a great feature that I think a few of the other ones have as well, called instant payout. So at the end of the night, I go over to the event organizer, instant payout on that, click it, and the money literally went in his bank within about 5 seconds. So it's a great feature for him to use for that. And it keeps things going at an event, because normally you wait for a while afterwards to get your money. So it's good to have that instantly. And they're really good to use as well, the battery life. And we hooked these up to our Keysims that were in the day ticket area and also the camping area. And we just hooked them up to that, and it used very minimal data through the whole weekend, taking payments, which was great. I think that's all the slides, isn't it, Mark? I think that's... or is there more? Oh yes. If you go to the next one, this was my Hobbit hole for the weekend. So we have something that we're going to showcase hopefully in the next month or so. Is that about right? Hopefully, yeah. Fingers crossed. So I'm not going to talk about that because I want it to be somewhat of a surprise for people who haven't seen it. So this is what I had without that being there. I look like a conductor with this. So I bought an awning for the side of my car, and this is where I lived, and it was great. I mean, it did have a floor in it the next day I used it because it comes with a floor, and I forgot to install that, and a spider crawled in, and I got scared, so I decided the next day I'd put the floor on just to make it de-spidered. It was great. There was no spiders in it at all. So little awning, had a table in there, and a little chair. It's only big enough for one person, to be honest. I think it would be a bit of a squeeze with anyone else other than that, but it was great for what I needed over the weekend. Had a fan set up and my laptop, and I could view everything that was happening across the site. I could view how much data was going through each access point, where that data was coming from in terms of websites and what devices. And then I could also see which websites were the most sort of used in terms of data. So if, let's say, we were having a bit of a issue with people using more data than was available, and they were using Facebook on the trader network, we could say, right, well, you're not allowed Facebook anymore because it's only for taking payments. So we shut it down. We ended up just shutting down video streaming. So that means your TikTok, YouTube, Facebook video, Netflix wouldn't work, but Facebook feed would, and you could upload your photos and stuff because that didn't use much data. So we shut down that. But all of this can be controlled by one laptop, which is amazing. And you can control it wirelessly. I mean, you can plug in if you need to, but you can control it wirelessly, which is great. And I also had a nice little view across the field. And it was a great little point for people just to come up, and if they needed anything, just give me a knock on the side of my little door there and they could get in. So that was our little setup there, and it managed most of the site on that, which was really good. Then if you want to go to the next slide, because I know what that is now, I just remembered.
Yeah, but just to kind of add that the laptop isn't actually what's running it. So that's just allowing access. So the Ubiquiti UDM system that Dan mentioned earlier on is actually what runs the whole system and gives us that flexible control all over everything that actually happens. We weren't able to do that to that degree with the old system, but ultimately you invest in new equipment to give you more flexibility and to give you more control, and that's exactly what it does now. So yes, we can channel traffic to certain APs if we want to. If there's more traffic going to a certain AP, we can control exactly how much this, or should I say not how much, but the speeds of each access point and the networks. So we can allow, if it's literally just for taking payments, they don't need such great speeds on that particular network. We can adjust all of that. It just really does give us a lot of flexibility. And as Dan said, we can also control a lot of the traffic going to certain sites. So if people are potentially visiting sites that we don't want them to because it's heavy data usage, then we can actually block access to those particular sites as well. So it's just a case of being a little bit mindful of kind of what you're doing when you're in these kind of areas. But yeah, this system is massively powerful in the amount of control that it gives us for absolutely everything that's going through the system.
Yeah. And do I think Ubiquiti is the best out there? No. I think there's other systems that are equally as great, if not better. But for what we need it for, and for where things are at the moment, and for the control we have over the Ubiquiti system, it is second to none and far better than what we had before. I mean, even I forgot to mention, I'd just like to say a massive thank you to Eric from Art of Wi-Fi. I forgot to say this at the start. We weren't just providing trader Wi-Fi at this, and I haven't got any photos of this, but we were also providing a captive portal for the public to actually use Wi-Fi. And we had that data capped at how many megabytes they could do up and down, which we managed to do. So Eric helped me a lot because I had a call with him, and we got it all set up within about 10 minutes, and it was great, and it worked. And then at the end of the phone call, I went, bit of a problem though. This is going through my public IP address at home. And I'm not going to be at home when I'm doing this. I'm going to be on a field in the middle of nowhere. And I just sort of felt this face drop at that point, but we moved on. And I had looked into a few different things, and he did. And we eventually came up with a bit of an option using Ubiquiti's site magic. And it is magic because I don't know how it works. It just sort of does it. But we were able then to port in from my home network. I got a Ubiquiti system downstairs. We ported in from that tunneled into the UDM Pro that was remote. And as long as one of the things has a fixed IP address, we can then use that with a port forward to communicate with the remote one. I'll try and do something that explains that a bit better at some point, but I'd love to do a video on that because that is pretty amazing stuff and is genuinely interesting and helped us. I mean, that solved about 4 days worth of problems in half an hour. I mean, it still took the 4 days because I was causing the problems, but we got there. So a massive thank you to Eric from Art of Wi-Fi for that. And we'll be definitely using him in the future. So this image that's on the screen now. Sorry, Mark.
I was just going to say, and to explain what a captive portal is, it allows us to actually take some contact details of people who are actually logging in to use the Wi-Fi, so that they could then be, obviously with the right kind of permissions, be then used in a marketing database that we can then pass on to the event organizers, who can use it for obviously sending out updates, for next year's event, and some information about, future stuff that's coming up. So it just gives them a communication channel, from them literally just having to use an email address to log in to access the Wi-Fi, which you've probably all done when you've been at venues and events and things. So finding a solution that actually worked for us, because it's in a remote location, was the biggest headache. And Dan spent quite a number of hours researching and trying to identify a solution that would actually work. But we have actually got there. There's probably still some tweaking to do. But again, if it's important for you, if you want to provide public facing, public access to Wi-Fi, then this is a great option for giving you a follow-up mechanism, basically. So
yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be very beneficial for these guys marketing the event afterwards with that data. So it'll be really good. You can also capture a lot of things like birthdays and addresses and stuff if you need it, but this was only email and first name, last name. So yeah, Ubiquiti does, I'll just touch on this, does have a captive portal built in, but it's not as good as what you can get externally. And then when you go external, that's when you start facing the problems if you don't have a public IP address. And having the Starlink, that really did cause the issues, because that does not give you a public IP address. And that uses a completely different system to transmit data. It uses what, is it GNAS off the top of my head? That sounds sort of familiar in my head. It's been now a week since I looked at it and I can't remember.
I don't know. I
Something beginning with G. GNet, GSNet. It's something to do with mobile networks, and it's what they use, and they don't give you a public IP address.
CGNAT.
That's it, CGNAT.
Yeah, carrier grade NAT. Yeah, which is basically the encryption protocol that allows traffic backwards and forwards. So.
Yeah. So luckily, by setting it up through my home broadband and site magicking to the Ubiquiti, we managed to solve that problem. But I'll do an in-depth video on that, actually. That might be a good idea, because I think a few people would be interested in that. Anyways, back to the photos, because I think it's our last one, isn't it? It's our last photo.
No, that was the last one.
Oh, could you go back to it? It was just
certainly
talk about what was on.
Yeah.
Sorry, just to be a pain, Mark. So this is a little snippet of what you can see back. I didn't want to show all of it because there's personal data that we could reveal with that. And I don't want to go around showing people's names of phones and potentially showing more. So I'll just show you this. This is actually Mark's phone. So if there's any personal data, it's all his problem. So this shows a few different things. So up there, obviously, we can name the device. I've named this Mark's phone, just so we can keep track of mine and Mark's phone when we're doing testing to see how much data is being used and all that sort of stuff. We can see the model, we can see the network, which is default. Now, what we actually did was we split, so you can set up networks within Ubiquiti, set up virtual ones. So I set up two. I set up one called public and one called trade. And through the trade, we can block certain sites. Through public, we can manage speeds and stuff. So, but this is just on the default network when we were testing the other week. You can also see what access point it's connected to. So DWAP04. So that one is connected to access point 4. And what we do is what I did when I did the event at the weekend is I just screenshotted a Google map of the site and drew on with my phone is just where each access point was. So I could see, right, if someone's having an issue with AP5 or AP4, I can go, right, AP5's there, and there it is. And also see what it's connected to. We can also see there the Wi-Fi experience. Now, that's a very generalistic scale. It gives you a bit of a scale on how good that person is connected to your router, your access point. So it depends on how close they are, how good of a connection they are getting for data. It'll change judging by how many people are congested to it. We never had an issue over the weekend with too many people connecting to one access point. Each of these access points can handle about 250 people. Now, one thing you've got to be very careful of is when that happens is your actual bandwidth. Because if you've only got 10 megabytes down, yes, I'm getting it right. I always get down and up confused, and I've done this loads over the past year or so, and it always confuses Mark because I always get them in the wrong order. So if someone is using 3 megabytes, another person's using another 3, maybe they're streaming a show or live streaming on the site or something, and they're using a lot of data, that's 6 megabytes gone, and you've only got 4 left. So then you need to distribute that. So as much as it is, right, this access point can handle 250 people, the bandwidth might not be able to handle that, and that's what you've got to be careful of, which is where you start looking at measuring how much bandwidth individuals can use. So obviously we set the public Wi-Fi up here to have a cutoff, basically, and that cutoff was 5 megabytes each at once. So you could use as much as you want through the day, it's unlimited, but you could only use 5 at a time. So it slows their speed down a bit, but it also means that you're leaving bandwidth there for traders. Now, luckily, traders don't use much bandwidth. So when we go to an event, normally we just leave it open. You just say, right, use whatever data you want, because each payment takes less than a meg to go through. So we can just leave it open to a lot of people. But yeah, it gives a lot of data, and there's also other insights there. You can see how the AP how the AP connection's going. You can also go into settings, and I can block devices, fix devices to certain access points if that's going to work. There's a load of stuff in this suite to actually change stuff, and a lot of stuff that I can't show you at the moment. But yeah, that's really it. I don't know if you've got any questions, Mark, or anything that you think should be gone over.
I think we were going to touch a little bit more on the actual Keysims and how powerful they are.
Yeah.
So we've actually been using Keysims now for 18 months, maybe a bit longer. So I got the first one to use for basically testing the ability to be able to connect to different networks, obviously with just a single SIM, and using it for various different kind of testing purposes. And I actually found it really, really effective because it chooses based on what your preference is. So you can either lock it to a network if you want to, or you can just open it up to all networks, and it will choose not necessarily the strongest signal, but it chooses the one that is the most stable, because these SIMs are used a lot for IoT devices, which is the Internet of Things. So it's devices that need to be connected to send data backwards and forwards all the time, and they are used a lot in smart devices, etc. CCTV systems, things like that will give remote access and send data to an app or whatever. But we've actually found that they've been really, really effective for our remote live streaming instances, where we use a live view system, which actually has 2 dongles, 4G dongles with a Keysim in each of them. And we have been able to provide the best streaming stability when we've done our remote location live streams, especially when we do our funeral live streams that tend to be in very old buildings that have thick walls and don't have access to Wi-Fi. And even then, I think I would say that they were probably more stable than Wi-Fi because, they're using a cell signal which doesn't fluctuate as much, isn't quite as affected by other devices in the area as a Wi-Fi signal quite often can be. So we found that these Keysims have been absolutely second to none for our experience of being able to do these remote live streams. As I say, quite often these particular churches that we do the live streams from for these funerals have tended to be in remote locations that haven't got particularly strong cell signals anyway, but because these particular SIMs use data they connect to the cell tower in a slightly different way to the way that a normal mobile SIM card would, because they're not necessarily relying on telephony data. It's just data. It's the only way I can describe it.
We're really technically at EW Media, can you tell?
There's a lot of terminology here that it goes really in depth on how these kind of things work. But if you're ever interested in them, give us a shout. We can always give you a bit of more detailed information about them. It's just trying to break it down so that it's in a bit more of a layman's terms. But quite often, cell towers will prioritize certain types of data backwards and forwards, and they usually have a tendency to focus on obviously telephony-based data, which ultimately is why they're connecting to a cell tower anyways, to be able to make a telephone call, which is why more often than not you can make a phone call but not receive mobile data to maybe stream a Netflix show because it's just not strong enough. But these Keysims have a tendency to structure the data slightly differently with the cell tower, so they work extremely well. And because our live view system bonds two of them together, we can actually bond two different cell networks together to give us a much stronger signal. So say, for instance, one was connected to Vodafone, the other one could be connected to EE or O2 or 3, and depending on who's got the most stable. It's probably better to do that than to have two SIMs connected to the same network. Yeah. So two running on Vodafone, you're probably better off. And that's why the Keysims are so good at that, because they will actually determine that themselves. So they won't always necessarily go for the same one on both occasions, which is something that I wasn't familiar with until we started using them in the live view systems, and found them extremely good. So.
Yeah, and Graham and the whole team there are just, they've just been amazing helping us with stuff and helping with bits over the years, and just massive thanks to them, especially over the last couple of days with just needing a couple of extra, and them just being so accommodating. Graham is just a bit of a legend. So
yes,
yeah, I'll send him a Christmas card. How's that?
Yes, and we have introduced him to Mesh networks now, which is something that he wasn't familiar with previously. That is a bit of an in-joke, which you can explain, Dan, if you'd like to.
I put a post out Monday going, look what a great job we did over the weekend. We had a Mesh network across the whole event site, and I'd spelt it M-A-S-H, Mesh. What it's meant to say is actually mesh, which is what it is. And I realised this spelling after Graham had screenshotted it, shared it on his own LinkedIn, and everyone else had shared it all over and not realised the same mistake. So I put a photo of mashed potato on his post and said, go the Mesh network. And now he shared a post congratulating on the fact that he got a sale from sharing our post about Event Wi-Fi, and said it was go the Mesh network. So that's what it's called now. I'm changing the website. SEO might go a bit shit, but we're going to be called Mesh Network now.
Indeed. Yes, leverage your best opportunities there. So, but hopefully that's given everybody a bit of an insight into Event Wi-Fi. if you've got any questions, by all means, get in touch, send us a DM or send us an email. You can find all our contact details at thewmedia.co.uk, and we'll be happy to answer them either on the spot through email or potentially in a future live stream Rebel show where we'll go a bit more in depth if you do have any burning questions related to any of the subject matter that we've covered today. So we will hopefully be back, because we feel as if we've had a bit of a hiatus recently just because of a few of the projects that we've had. We will endeavour to be back in a couple of weeks' time. We've got a busy couple of weeks coming up, but hopefully we can actually manage to get another show out. If not, we'll do that slightly after some of these big projects have kind of subsided a little bit, but we'll see how we come along. But
I've just thought you might have to do one on your own, or might have to miss one in 2 weeks' time, because I am not.
Yes, you're not available, so we'll see. We'll see. But if anybody does have any ideas for any content ideas, basically anything that we've covered in the past or anything that you would like us to delve into that is related to either live streaming, event Wi-Fi, or videography in general, we'll be more than happy to look at putting a show together for you, just to cover some of that knowledge that we both have. So have a great day, everybody. Thanks for joining us. If you're on the replay, don't forget you can still ask questions and we will endeavour to answer them. And we'll look forward to seeing you in a future episode. So for the time being, enjoy, and we will see you all again in the near future.
Talk to you later.